Now, I'm really happy that we have a panel today, because what we really want to do is, yes, we want to inspire, and yes, we want to educate, and yes, we want to inform. But at the end of the day, we want to know what it means to business leaders here in Canada, the real goods, where we can challenge some of the things we've talked about and provide perhaps a more realistic or applied version of those principles. So we have a number of, we have four phenomenal business leaders with us today. So please help me welcome. First of all, the Managing Director of Leadership Solutions for Knightsbridge. Please welcome Dr. Vince Molinaro. Vince, come on out. Vince, how are you?
Good, great.
Welcome, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Vince, what do you get out of attending? Because obviously, I mean, you're a huge thought leader in the space. I know you've got an article in the magazine. You've got some books at the back. What do you get out of something like this today?
You know, the area of leadership is always about learning, and so there's always new insights that helps me bring those ideas back to my team, and that's really what I'm here about. I'm keen to learn and keen to get those new insights, and we've got fabulous speakers that could provide that for us.
Great, awesome, thank you. Up next, we have the President and CEO of Aimia in Canada. Please welcome Vince Timpano. Welcome, Vince.
Welcome, thank you.
How are you?
Very good.
Now, Vince, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the organization? I'm sure that a lot of people know about it, but for those who don't.
We will need a bit of time for that. But,
and a 40-page deck.
Yeah, but no. Aimia actually is a Canadian-based organization. We operate in about 23 countries around the world. We've got about 5,000 employees. Its origins actually started out of Air Canada through a program called Aeroplan. And since that time, we've made numerous acquisitions where we've been able to stretch beyond the Canadian border, grow the Canadian business. Our core is around loyalty marketing with a focus on analytics as well.
A great Canadian success story. So thank you very much for coming today. Up next, please welcome the General Manager for Canada of IBM Global Business Services at IBM, Todd Lavieri. Hello, Todd. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. Excellent. Now, Todd, I know that you've been in Canada, is it about a year now? Is that right?
A year, yep.
And you worked in the U.S. before that. What are there, for leaders, you know, are there big differences between the two countries?
Well, as you can imagine, in a global organization like ours, the major markets, there are a lot of similarities, great clients, great people, similar services. Obviously, there's a scale difference, no question about it, but you know, we're finding more and more Canadian companies becoming much more global, obviously leveraging our global capabilities. You know, a few things. One, you know, last winter, I don't think it stopped snowing, so I had to get used to that a little bit. When I was first asked when I got here what my favorite hockey team was, I said the Hartford Whalers, and everybody sort of looked at me and said, eh. So I've changed allegiances.
So who's your favorite hockey team?
Well, it's got to be Toronto.
A to play to the room. Yeah, very nice, very nice. And up next, please welcome the President and CEO of ING Direct, Peter Aceto. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Ron.
It sounds like you've got a couple of fans out there. Do we have some ING Direct staff in the audience?
There's only two. They're just really loud.
They're very loud. Now, I understand your title is going to change from ING Direct. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, for those who don't know, we were acquired by Scotiabank about a year ago. And easy over there. And one of the part of the deal is ING, the global company, gave us 18 months to continue to use ING. So in the spring, we have to change our name. Yeah. So we just announced to the world that we're going to be changing our name from ING Direct to Tangerine. And so we're really, really excited about continuing to be different and distinctive and really change the way Canadians do banking in this country.
And really built on the legacy of ING Direct with kind of a hat tip to the color, though, right? I imagine that was behind the thinking?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, although my colleague and friend here might disagree, he likes the orange color as well. But I think when you think of our brand, you really do think of the color orange, and it's great that we're going to be able to keep that color.
Great. Okay. Well, let's get to it. And I'm looking now at the stage, and I think we can take this show on the road and call it Five Dudes in Dark Suits. Five white dudes in dark suits. So I started off the day joking about the current state of leadership in this city. And I don't want to get into the politics of it, but at the local level and at the federal level, right or wrong, there's certainly been a response from Canadians. And because of what's going on in government and in sports and other places, is there a cynicism around leadership? Just by calling ourselves leader, are people fairly cynical about that, Vince?
Yeah, I think you don't have to, like you say, you don't have to look very far, and it doesn't, relegate itself to politics or to business. It's everywhere. You're right, and I think the reality is we look up, we have huge expectations of our leaders, and they let us down, and I think that begins with disappointment. And if it gets really bad, it becomes, we become a bit delusioned, and I think that's where the cynicism is. If you look at some of the research, 7% of employees have trust and confidence in their senior leaders. How can we ever succeed with that low number? Yeah. And maybe only 25% of employees are ever fully engaged in their work and really giving their best. And all of it points back to leadership or weak leadership. So I think the cynicism is real. And I think it also, what it does is it casts a negative light on all of us really trying to work hard as leaders to show up every day to be the best we can be.
Right. So 7% of employees trust their leaders. Wow. Right now, 95% of this room is claiming that they're in the 7%. Yeah, Vince, yeah.
So I would agree with Vince's comment. I think there is a tremendous amount of cynicism in as far as what it is that business can accomplish in today's environment. And what I mean by that is the environment is characterized by a lot of short-term thinking in terms of what it is that the business is expected to deliver. And when you think about a short-term thinking framework and focus on short-term results, you sometimes get values that are compromised, and they happen at the leadership level. Whether it's a give on things like transparency or honesty, core values are being compromised, and the consequence of something like that is it's difficult in that environment for leaders to establish followers. Right. In particular, when you consider that leadership, in my opinion, is an earned privilege, and that gets lost when, in fact, they're not seeing their leaders model the behaviors that they talk a lot about.
Yeah. Now, yeah, Todd, I was going to ask, for a huge global organization, is it tougher when leaders maybe move around a little bit more? I mean, they get great international exposure and experience, but is it difficult with that cynicism when you show up?
That's a great question. I think there's certainly cynicism around bad leadership, and I agree with what Vince said in terms of inspiring people and how important that is on a personal basis. I would say though, as I move around, I was in Japan prior to coming to Canada. I've been in the U.S. I've been literally worked all over the world. There's some great leaders out there. Yeah. I mean, great. And I think about what a lot of that leadership, almost a generation of leaders went through in 08, 09, 2010. Yep. It was a near-death experience for some. Yep. It was tough. They're better. In fact, they're terrific leaders, and they've got great organizations who are in much better shape today. And so my only point would be that, that they never get on the front page. Right. You don't get the Letterman top 10 list of a great leader, right? Right, yeah. So, there's, I think, really an opportunity to look past a little bit of the headlines and find some terrific, great leadership all over the world.
Yeah. Peter, how do you bring those people to the headlines if they're not in the corner office or the C-level? How do you acknowledge those people?
That's a great question. So if you talk about the headlines literally, so media, there's really not much we can do about that. So you could probably be more helpful in that regard. I'll tell you, like these gentlemen, I've met a lot of leaders that are absolutely fantastic. In fact, I think what's sad about this whole situation is probably the overwhelming majority of leaders are good and have great values and do care more than just about the shareholder, but about community, about employees, about customers. It's just the small group of people who have behaved so badly over the last 10 years wrecks it for all of us. So we have to work really hard, and we've got to be as close to perfect as possible to, improve the overall view of leadership. And I think the easiest place for us to do it is inside the organizations that we lead.
But what are you doing on a daily basis to overcome that? I ask any of you that, but I mean, I agree, yeah, you've got to work harder to do it, but what specifically can you do to counteract it?
So one of the things that we're starting, and it's not unique to our organization, is we're actually trying to create a culture where leadership development is a core priority for the organization. And it's not just the focus on what you need to deliver, but we're putting a premium on how it is that you go about delivering against the results. And so I come back to my point on the focus on the short term is great in the near term, but will sustain an organization is leadership that balances its focus between the what and the how they deliver. So for us, it really is rethinking how it is that we actually build a new generation of leaders that are leading the businesses.
Yeah, I was going to say, Peter, that's going to be really important for you guys because you differentiate yourself from this massive big FIs out there, parent company notwithstanding. But it's got to be pretty critical for you to develop the next generation, right?
Yeah, and of course, leadership development is critical. I think anyone in the room as a leader understands how important that is. I think, from my perspective and for the leaders in our organization, we do other things too that are a little untraditional. For example, we don't have any offices. We're trying to break down those traditional things that separate leaders from the people that they lead, right?
Right.
So I completely agree with all these things. I think they're absolutely necessary, maybe even table stakes. But I think there's other things that we can do to break down the stereotype of a CEO. Big offices, spending $1 million on your office. Well, how about not having an office at all, right?
Right, yeah.
How about getting on the front lines and fighting for business, just like you make your people do on the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So leading from within, I think, is one way you can actually begin to break down those barriers.
Yeah. Sorry, Todd, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to say one thing I did. As you can imagine, our organization is very execution focused, develops great leaders, has programs up and down the organization, as you might imagine. But one thing I just did just a few weeks ago is I started a blog on leadership, because one of the things I wanted to do was, one, engage our Gen Y employees and begin to make sure the millennials had a way of getting those experiences. So I started a blog. And I just started every day putting out lessons of leadership, some self-learned, others, just from experience that I've had, to CEOs and other executives I've worked with, and engage them in a discussion rather than read a book or here's an email. And, and one of the messages was dive in. And just dive in. I want you to get your hands dirty. Learn how to be a leader through experiences. So there's lots of ways, I think, to help that group of professionals become better leaders.
Yeah. Just curious, by applause, how many millennials are in the audience? Initially, they were too lazy to clap. There's not that many of them here, or they're all just on Instagram right now. Are there different strategies, Vince, this is a whole new generation of people. Well, one, I guess, are the stereotypes true? I joked about it, but are those the stereotypes we're seeing?
Yeah, my point of view is, through my own experience, the answer is yes and no. On the yes part, they are wired differently, because I believe the millennials that I've worked with and have been on my team, they actually set really high expectations of great leadership. So they want to work with great leaders. And if they don't get that, if their experience is bad or mediocre, they will leave. And I think that's the difference between, let's say, boomers and millennials. Millennials leave, boomers would have stayed and put up with it. So I think that's real. But I think a lot of the stereotypes around what motivates them, about what really drives them, I think it's an age and stage. I remember feeling like they did, in terms of wanting to have impact in the organization, wanting to do work that's meaningful, wanting to contribute. And so if you as a leader can create that opportunity where they are, where they understand that what they do matters to the business, you can really engage them pretty fully.
Yeah. Todd?
Well, I would just add that in 10 years, 70% of the workforce would be millennial.
Right.
10 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard Stephen make the comment, the 3 words that are hard to say.
I don't know.
And he said, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a generational comment. Millennials have no problem saying that. They're just so honest. They're social, they're mobile, they're very aggressive, very smart. So you have to create a framework around them to help them be successful.
Yeah. So Vince, should leaders be leading in a different way for different generations, or do you have to be kind of consistent in behavior?
I think organizations need to behave differently.
Yeah.
My view on the role of Gen Ys and the millennial is they are different. The ones I work with, very bright, talented individuals. But the differences lie similar to what Vince had said. One is they know what they want, they're not afraid to call it out. So it actually forces a much more transparent conversation. It's leaders that have to be more accepting and willing to have that honest, transparent conversation.
Yeah.
Two is, I think they're having a remarkable impact on culture in two areas in particular. Their standards for work-life balance. That doesn't mean they're lazy. They just have higher standards around work-life balance. And secondly, they're more socially aware, much more socially conscious, which is actually forcing an organization to think about how it is that they do good in communities, as an example. So I think we do have to think about how we work differently.
Yeah.
So just to complement that, because I completely agree, and certainly the thought, if you were going to ask about this, for me is why not I don't see this group of people to be tremendously different than people I work with. Now, we have a lot of them in our organization because our average age is probably a little bit lower, right? But they're driving change in our organization, forcing our organization to change relatively quickly, be more community involved, which we always have been, but have more flexibility around the workplace, for example. Flexibility about hours, flexibility around dress code, right? And I've learned that boomers and Gen Xers tend to like that stuff too, right? So I think it's net beneficial to allow them to have influence.
Yeah, there's fewer people with ties, I guess, right? Once you get the millennials in there.
Everybody seems to like that.
Yeah, yeah. Now, are we, we used to define diversity by gender and by race. Are we expanding that now that the generational things? Are we expanding that definition of diversity within the organization?
I think you have to.
Yeah.
I think it's diversity is important. It's difficult, but for me, what I want to capture is diversity in thought, diversity in the conversation, the diversity in different opinions, and really trying to create an environment where those opinions and thoughts, be it different, are actually working their way through to the front line. So, yeah. Yeah,
and are there ways that you're allowing those to come or encouraging those to the front line? Any one of you? Yeah,
sure. We have, as you can imagine, very diverse teams. Could be very global, could be different backgrounds, different points of view, certainly, lots of experiences. The one thing we have to teach our leaders, and we have to demonstrate ourselves, is maybe two things. One, we really want to encourage that diversity. That's one of our core practices within IBM. We have that stated as a core practice.
Yeah.
But two messages: we're one team, and you might need some guidelines and principles to put around that team so that it can stay on track. But within that, we want to encourage that. Could be from an innovation point of view, could be from you never know where the source of those good ideas are going to come from, and so we have to encourage it all the way down.
But just to play devil's advocate, but isn't, every organization every one of these people, isn't every organization saying, we want diversity, and they've got the success series posters on the wall, and I guess you tell me, is there a gap between what you want and the application of it? Yeah, Peter?
I don't think it's that easy, to be honest with you, and I think it's something that we and I personally grapple with. And I do agree with the points that are here. In Toronto in particular, in Canada, there's an amazing opportunity for diversity, right? Geographically, age, a variety of different things. But how to take advantage of it, I think, is really important. There are biases in the way that we were taught, biases in the way that we think that make it difficult for diversity and real differing opinions and different ways of looking at things to get to the surface. So even the lens with which we as individuals look at things, we've got to sort of challenge that. So I actually think it is very difficult. I think we all want it. We all get it to a certain extent. But it is more difficult to actually do it than to say it.
And I think that's okay, right? I think it's such it can be a sensitive subject that we don't want to admit, much like I don't know, the three toughest words to say. I think it's also as difficult to say, it's challenging to implement some of these things that sound wonderful and are wonderful. I want to get at, there's so much that is changing, that the world outside our organizations, whether it's the technological influence or the social influence or changing consumer habits, all that stuff. And you talk to anybody in any organization, it's like everything is just changing. It's change, change, change. How do you lead in a time of such uncertainty? When there's so much uncertainty, how do you be that consistent voice through an organization?
I mean, I can share sort of what I do and the work we do with leaders, but I think it is, you know, it starts with you, right?
Yep.
It starts with each of us to get really clear on what are our core values, what's important to us, have a really clear vision of what we need to accomplish in the business, and then have that sense of personal resilience and resolve to really see the way forward. I think that becomes critical. What's also different from a leadership perspective is if you do that and think you could do it alone, then that's a recipe for failure. And so what you really need to do is build a strong group of leaders around you who can support you in moving forward. Because I think it is too challenging today for just one person to have all the answers to do it all. And so you get way more by building leadership strength.
Yeah, and is that the toughest thing for leaders to acknowledge, that maybe they want to hire or recruit somebody that might be better than them? And
well, the smart ones get over that pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
They realize they can't do it all and realize the value that comes from having people stronger than you in areas that complement your own skill set.
Yeah.
And if you don't get there, then you're just in for a long slog.
Yeah, Vince, did you have a comment there?
This is really hard, but it's a reality. It's what makes business fun, for sure. We talk a lot about looking for individuals who are comfortable in dealing with ambiguity, because it is, I mean, the answers aren't ever present.
Yeah.
And that challenges me, who's always wanting to have the answer at my fingertip, but understanding that decisions need to be made in the absence of. And so when you're looking for types of individuals, and sometimes it requires you to think about, you know, do you have the right inventory of talent, if I can call it that?
Sure, yeah.
To be able to deliver against the ambiguity that exists in the market, feel comfortable in taking risk without having all the answers. And the reality is, organizations, if they're going to call that out, they have to allow employees to fail.
Right.
You know, and that's something people have to get comfortable with, because chances of failure are high when you're making decisions when the answers aren't always clear.
Right, right. So if, for example, one of your employees is caught sleeping on the job, you shouldn't fire them and then go and do crack and not fire yourself. I'm just hypothetically, if that were to occur.
It's a good example.
Is that unique, consistent value?
Yeah, exactly.
That's right, Todd. Did you have a...
Well, I'm not going to touch that. But, you know, interesting, just in terms of the point around uncertainty. You know, I mentioned it 5 years ago, severe uncertainty.
Yeah.
Today, you know, in the realm of normal uncertainty, we never know what's going to happen tomorrow. We just completed this C-suite study. We interviewed 4,000 executives around the world. And I went back and really looked at the results and compared them over the last 10 years. And the one thing that jumps off the page is that our clients have dropped global macroeconomic issues down in terms of their big concern for the next 3 to 5 years, and they put their customer number one. They said, this is a very customer-centric time. We need to do this for our customers and that for engage in our customer. I think just stepping away from that, that's a very optimistic view, if you will. Now, like I said, you never know what could happen tomorrow, but it's interesting in the dynamic of the uncertainty. We're in a point where maybe it's maybe a little more foot on the gas than on the brake.
And I would think the headspace of saying we've got to put our customer first is a little easier to then say, and our people should be right up there, right? I mean, because it's a very outward.
Because it's one and the same.
Right.
Because people serve our customers.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now, is that a research available for if
it's back there?
It's at the booth. So while you're trying to win an iPad, go back and you can get a copy of this.
Yeah, I'm not sure the copies are out there, but the survey's been out, and we interviewed executives in this room probably for the results. Yeah.
So make sure you check that out. I'm sure a lot of great learning there. Peter, yeah.
I think just to put a finer tune on this, or maybe a broader one, I think change is awesome, right? I mean, and where times are uncertain is a fantastic opportunity for you, for your business, to win, to go a little faster than your competition. So I don't think everybody thinks that way, and I think in our organization of 950 people, not everyone probably feels the way I do about that, but I think it's times like this are the times where real opportunities present themselves for you to take advantage of. The only thing I would mention other than that is in times of uncertainty, in times of ambiguity, trust is a really important word, right? So we have to make decisions quicker. Sometimes we can't communicate with the speed with which that people would prefer. So if there's a high level of trust and equity for leadership in the company, It's times like these where that is super, super helpful, which means you've got to be building it all the time so that you can use it when you need it.
Yeah, I think it was, and don't quote, I think it was Patrick Lencioni who was on this stage, who said, the conflict that occurs within organizations when there's trust, that's collaboration. When there's no trust, that's politics. Which I think is a great line. I think it's Patrick. Don't quote me on that. Now Vince, interesting when you said, that you're really looking for people who are comfortable with ambiguity. Back to Adam's point earlier today of making sure that the right people are on the bus and the wrong people aren't on the bus. Are you changing your recruiting of who you're recruiting to match the kind of the personal leadership styles of the people embedded within the organization?
I mean, the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
I mean, how we're thinking about recruiting has become a lot more sophisticated than it may have been 5 and 10 years ago. And it's not just on the basis of experiences or attributes, it's the two. The sum of someone's experiences can bring real value to an organization, but being able to understand their attributes and how it is that they can behave and how it is that they act and react in situations that are tough.
Right.
Right? And I liked your point earlier in terms of this notion of, and it's difficult to do, right? Building the resilience of an organization to know that sometimes you're not always going to have the answer. It's not always going to go the way that you want it to go, but you can press ahead.
Yeah, yeah. There is a leadership paradox, I guess, that in one way, and we've heard everything, certainly from Adam's talk this morning about givers. The paradox is that, yes, we should be nice and caring and genuine and lead with our values and encourage trust. On the other hand, when push comes to shove, leaders got to make some tough decisions. And sometimes people are hurt when those decisions are made. How do you balance that out? Todd, how do you balance that paradox?
I think, I think the lead and inspire on the one hand and make the tough calls on the other, it's really the other side of the same coin. Your talent in your organization wants to know as a leader you're making those tough calls. They want to know that to help them, to inspire them, to energize them. And so I think as long as it's clear that those are the rules and these are the way that things are going to be spelled out. Now the question would be, how do you make the tough calls? Make it clear, get all the facts, do all the things you need to do that properly, and you have a lot of respect for across the organization for the tough calls.
Yeah, yeah. Peter, how do you balance that?
Yeah, I think I do. This is an issue I personally grapple with because I enjoy connecting with people, and that's part of who I am naturally, and I think what people like about me. But it does make it a little tougher to make the tough calls, particularly as it relates to people, not business issues. When I look in the mirror in the morning, I'm personally responsible and accountable for our business, and all 950 of our employees expect that I'm making the right calls for the long-term sustainability of the business. If I'm not making those calls, or my team, or we are not making those calls in the long term, it's not good for anybody in the end of the day. So it's tougher when you connect, when you bond with people, but you got to make the right calls for the business because there's 949 other people that will suffer if you don't make the right call in the end of the day. It's a constant battle. It's constantly a little bit winning and a little bit losing. People issues are issues that need to be fought hand to hand every single day. You can't deal with them in a broad brush. So
yeah, and Vince, one of your colleagues, Leanne Davey, has a piece. It's called The New Nice, I think, right? That's really just redefining what that means to be nice as a leader.
Yeah, I think, there's a great piece in her book around that, in her blogs. My personal experience has been, I think a trap for a lot of leaders is, wanting to be liked, and that muddies the water when you're having to make the tough calls. And the reality is, being liked as a leader is overrated. So get over that. And really focus on what Peter is saying is what's your obligation to the company. Now, being tough doesn't mean you're uncaring or you're demeaning. Because
you're fired.
Right, if you think about all the real tough leaders or teachers or coaches that we've had in our lives, at the core of it was a sense that they really cared about you more than you probably appreciated. And sometimes the care is about the people, sometimes it's about the future of the company, sometimes it's about the community that you serve and work in, and so those are, as Peter said, that's what makes it challenging, but you can't lose sight of ultimately your obligation to your company.
Yeah, is that one of the more difficult leadership skills to develop, do you guys find?
Making the tough calls?
Yeah, of getting someone to the point within an organization to grow them as a leader to the point that they don't mind making the tough, or they see the value in making the tough calls.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult. It is difficult for me personally.
Yeah.
What Vince was touching on was a conversation that I have with my team, and that's drawing the distinction between caring and caretaking.
Yep.
And caring is actually having the honest, transparent, difficult discussion, explaining why it is that you made the decision that you made. In many respects, caretaking is the role that we take on because we want to be liked, and they're difficult conversations, so you shield them from the truth around the decisions and their capabilities. And the reality is, it's the caring is actually a good thing, and you can care and not just be a nice guy. You can have the tough conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Now, if leaders lead other people, and they have all the skill sets we've talked about. Who leads the leaders? I mean, where do you go for development personally? Peter, who do you look to lead you?
That's a good question, Ron. You want to help me out with
One
that?
that I did not prep you with before.
No, absolutely. Look, I think it's critical, right? And I think, for me, I think the best learnings for me have been experiences, right? And I've always looked at the organization that I've worked with. I've had the privilege to work with ING Direct for 17 years, different places, different jobs. That's not the way I planned it.
Yep.
There was always learning opportunities and new experiences for me. And I think if those opportunities dried up where I was not doing something new or different or had a new challenge or a new mountain or a new growth or a difficult time in 2008, 2009, I would probably have to move along. I got to tell you, coaches, executive coaches, for example, I'm sure there's plenty in the room, so don't throw tomatoes at me or tangerines or whatever you want to throw at me.
I think they're called life coaches.
Life coaches. So I have found there have been 2 points in my career where I've used a coach that really helped me get to a different level. It's for a very, very specific time in my career, as opposed to sort of a general use. Yep. One was when I made the first jump to a senior executive team where I was one of the top 5 people in the bank, and I needed to perform at that level I'd never been at before, and I had some personal issues with the people on the team. I got some help with that.
Yep.
I persevered, became a respected member of that team, and then taking on a new role as a CEO and being responsible and accountable for a team, that was another place where, for a very defined period, that was super helpful for me.
Yeah, I guess as a C-level executive, it's important to get that outside the organization. Todd, is that fair?
Well, we're unique in some ways. I get, in terms of exercising our muscles, we have a great other pool of resources, which is our clients.
Right.
We work with great leaders, and you can learn a lot from the people that we work with. We also have a fabulous mentoring program, as you can imagine. Yep. But I would add one dimension to this people might not have thought of. Our purpose as an organization is called Be Essential. You need to add content to your skills and your capability. That actually helps you continue to be a better leader. Just don't get stale. Keep an edge on. Get sharp. And then you might gravitate towards being a leader on a board or in a community program, whatever that may be. But keep working with other leaders as you continue to sharpen your skills.
Yeah. Vince, did you want to add into that?
Well, yeah.
Sorry, Vince Timpano.
We
should have separated you.
Yes.
Difficult thing to do again. Show a little vulnerability.
Yeah.
Seek feedback from your employees. It's harder as you move up in an organization to get straight, unsolicited feedback from your bosses. It's just not going to happen, whether it be the board or otherwise. But it's them that observes you in your behavior every day. And it's them that's going to tell you how it is that you're performing as a leader relative to your leadership intent. And try to reconcile the two. I mean, it's a difficult conversation to have, but I think there's a tremendous amount of feedback, create an environment where they're talking to you about your leadership.
It's got to, because I imagine if I was within a large organization, the CEO came to me and said, how do you think I'm doing? I'd probably want to say, great. You're doing really well. So how do you get that real, honest feedback?
So I think it comes down, look, I think I've started everything with, it's difficult. I think it's about building trust, first and foremost.
Yep.
It's about being authentic as a leader so that they feel comfortable in having those conversations with you. It's showing a little bit of vulnerability, and it's actually demonstrating that you're going to act on some of the feedback. Not all of the feedback, But if you declare to your organization that this is the type of leader that I want to be, this is the culture we're trying to create, it's easy for them to do a quick scorecard on how are you doing, and them holding you to account and you continuing to progress.
Right.
So
great. I'll ask one last question for each of you before we come into the audience, and we'll take some questions from the audience. Simply, starting with you, Vince, what makes you most proud as a leader?
I think for me it's two things: being able to create a sustainable business that is successful, that really gets me going, and then really just seeing the team grow. Whether they're team members who've been with us for a long time, new millennials that have joined, and watching them grow and contribute, that's what jazzes me because of the impact they have on our clients.
Yeah. Vince?
I would have similar to, it's doing what you set out to do. I tend to set expectations for myself and the organization quite high. You publicize what it is that you're trying to do, and then you deliver against it, because it's about execution. And then the second thing is, when I think about creating an environment where people actually really like the organization, where people can talk about this being a great place to be, and driving an engaged workforce.
Great. Todd, how about you?
Well, I would say that the successes of the team, if I look back at the things that have been built, or the clients we've served, or the work we've done, and I see, someone I worked with 10 years ago in the Wall Street Journal that I know we were together doing something together, or I see someone on CNBC, or I see a white paper that gets published, there's nothing more rewarding than the success of those individuals that I know that we were part of a team together.
Great.
I think common answer, my favorite thing is to watch individuals or teams achieve things that they themselves didn't think was possible. I think it's a magical thing to see.
Well, that's where I'm different. I hate people succeeding. I want to squash them. Okay, we'll come into the audience, and I will start way over here. You dropped your glass. Start way over here. So I will just come down the aisles, and for the 5 millennials, who you won't know this, but I'm doing a Phil Donahue impersonation, okay? You can look that up.
Yeah. Thank you, leaders, for your comments here. My question is related to values and ethics. Was there a time when your values were put in direct competition or direct conflict with the bottom line? And if so, how did you go about in reconciling that, even considering the possibility that your bottom line will suffer?
Anybody want to take that? I wouldn't. But don't make me pick someone.
You go. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you go ahead. I'll go after.
Looks like Todd, you're going to...
I'll volunteer. So, a good question, but do you know, I have to say, one of the most important things as a leader is that you have to have, no question, lead with maturity and integrity. And I'll be honest with you, as I was listening to your question, and I think if I heard it right, it was, when are you in conflict? When could a situation come up where you've been in conflict? I'm my rack in my brain, I'm not sure it's ever happened, and I'll tell you why. You just stay squeaky clean. There's no gray zone. And in the squeaky clean world, it's easy, and most importantly, your team knows that. So, if that's a fair answer to the question, those would be my thoughts.
And I imagine that's even it's heightened even more, isn't it, with the social the way it is, that the camera's always on 24/7, isn't it?
Where are you?
Yeah, we couldn't hear you, Vince.
I'm just floating in the audience.
He's having a
So I'm to your left, and we have a question right here.
I'm going to ask a simpler question than that one.
How much do you make?
Right at the end, you were talking about employee engagement. So obviously we have a lot of social media with Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. How do you work on having your employees engage and sharing great things? So Peter Aceto, obviously you have a very engaged company. People talk about it on Twitter and so forth. And the rest of the leaders out there, how do you encourage your employees to engage on social media and talk about where they work and why they enjoy being there?
Social integration.
I think I heard my name there, so I'll take that one. And it's a bit difficult to hear, Ron, just so you know. But
okay.
I think it was about employee engagement, and that it was referred to before. and how is it that we get our employees to engage. Certainly I could tell you our experience at ING Direct. My leadership philosophy is very simple. We put our employees first. We're a retail business. One differentiating factor for us is the service our customers receive. I know if our employees believe in our why and why we exist and are excited to come to work every day and happy to come to work every day, that our customers are going to feel that in every interaction. And I totally believe that's true. So that's where our focus is. We measure employee engagement. So we, from a departmental level, even from a leadership level, we have a view about where our weaknesses are. And we work to try and improve it. Communication's always on the list. It doesn't matter how hard you work. One of the top 3 things on the list is you don't communicate enough. So communication, making communication a two-way street. I'd say one of the biggest vehicles I personally have, and I think we were discussing this before, is we use social media on the inside of our business very, very much to engage hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of our employees with direct dialogue with leadership, including myself. So it creates a transparency, an openness, people comfortable asking questions, and I find that really helps from an overall engagement perspective. So it's something we measure very carefully and are constantly trying to improve.
I would add, can I add one point to that? On our business, our business is a very personal business. We ask a lot of our people. As you can imagine, they want to see their leadership, and it needs to be visible. When I first came to Canada a year ago, the first thing I did is I hit the road, and I went to almost every office in Canada. I met over 1,000 consultants in 60 days. And a lot of that was to begin an engagement with the dialogue. I wanted to open the door. I had gone out there personally to meet with them. Not so much so that they tell me something today, although that happened, but most importantly, they'd feel comfortable telling me something a month from now or 2 months later. That was how I did it.
I wanted to add just one element, because in my career, we've put together a lot of initiatives that were geared towards driving engagement. There's a fundamental belief that employees have to motivate themselves. All we can really do as leaders is create an environment for them where they believe that they have the tools that they can succeed. I think it's more than that. The one thing that's sometimes not spoken of, because you tend to have programs that are put in place, employees also like to win. They want to feel proud of the organization that they're working for. And I think communicating and being visible and communicating how well your organization is doing relative to whatever your priorities are doing, so that the employees know that their efforts are going towards a winning cause, whatever that cause might be.
Yeah, I would just add, Ron, and it's sort of a message for everyone in the room. Sometimes when we talk about employee engagement, we make it seem like this thing, this organizational initiative. But when you look at the exit surveys of most companies, most employees leave a bad leader. And so engagement starts at your level. It starts at the individual level, as Todd said, right? You had choices. You didn't have to travel the country in 60 days and meet all of those consultants. And so really, are you the aspiring leader that your employees want to engage with? That's a question we all have to ask ourselves every single day as leaders, because that's where I believe engagement starts.
Yeah, the funding there, people don't quit jobs, they leave leaders, I think is an incredible insight.
We're playing Spot the Ron from up here.
Can you see me now?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm the Verizon guy or whatever. So we're now down kind of in the middle. Go ahead.
Do you think it's possible to have a successful company if you have 2 leaders at the top that are competing against each other? So a CEO and a president. And what advice would you give them?
That must be for you guys.
I have experienced that.
Do you want to mention a very specific organization that you work for? And are they here today? Hypothetical, if you have a boss named Jim and another boss. Go ahead,
I'll
Vince.
jump into it. I've never experienced it, but as I think about your question, can you be successful? I think it's certainly going to be more difficult. But I think what has to be clear is, what are the unique accountabilities of the 2 individuals? Where do the decision rights lie across the spectrum? If, in fact, those aren't clear for the organization, you have chaos, right? You absolutely have chaos. But can you do it? I think you can, so long as you're disciplined up front. And how are you going to do it in defining the roles of the individuals and the decision rights within them, and making it clear to the organization on how the decisions are going to be made. Like I said, in the absence of that, if it's for the employee to figure out sort of the how it's going to be done on Monday and is it going to be different on Wednesday, I've never experienced it, but I would suspect that that could be very difficult.
Kiss both butts and let the cards fall where they may, I think. That's what you're saying.
Sounds like a taker.
Question right here.
Obviously, you're proud of where you guys are right now. I just wanted to know, is there anything you've done that you're not proud of that got you to where you are?
I slept around a lot. Next question.
That's why you're
next question.
Thank you for allowing us to have an Oprah moment.
I feel so much better now.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I won't.
That's not true, by the way.
Yeah, I'll start. You know, I wouldn't say.
I think you should say, I'll start and finish, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, you know, this is what leadership is. You got to put yourself out there,
Sure.
right? Just to be clear, I haven't done anything that would put me, would be a parody on SNL right at this point in time, but we can't all be so on the high horse on that one. You never know. I think it really comes down to the really difficult decisions you make that affect people's lives, that you know is right for the business, but you know it hits people hard. So it's letting people go, even if you're justified, the impact it has on the team, the impact it has on your clients. As much as you can say it's right for the business, and it is, personally, those are tough things. But what you find, and what I have found, is you do those things and it builds kind of a muscle and resilience, and then you learn, how do I avoid that next time? So I now know that I was probably to blame for some of those things because I didn't move quickly enough on poor performers, or I sat on certain people longer than I needed to. And so we're all going to be put in those situations. What do you learn from that in order to not make to be put in those situations in the future?
Great, thanks, Vince. Question back on this side, on your left.
Hi there. I work in the learning and development field, and I was wondering if any of you were the product of a formal leadership training program, and if so, what about that program was particularly effective for you and made you a better leader?
Any landmark grads up there, or anything?
I will say, when you talk about a formal leadership development program, I would say certainly I'm not a product of it, other than I worked for leaders who put me in a lot of different situations. So most of my leadership learning was experiential, getting jobs that maybe my resume wasn't exactly suited for, and finding a way with others to persevere. So I think experiencing allowed the learning to continue, which personally I think is the best way for a leader to learn.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think that's exactly right, but don't be afraid to ask for it either. So that was probably a lot of apprentice and a lot of informal leadership training in that regard, but you have to ask for it. And ask for the opportunity to be a leader sometimes. Don't be afraid to.
Thank you. I'm now to your right.
Over this way.
Over
Hello,
here.
gentlemen. Great panel this afternoon. It's been super interesting. A question for Peter. I'm curious as to the branding process that you guys underwent for the Tangerine branding, and how you guys failed along the way, and kind of what you did to mitigate and lead that process with your team.
So before you put the mic down, I think you asked, I actually couldn't hear this, so could you guys hear? No, sure. You asked me about the process for which we chose Tangerine, but then there was a second part I just didn't hear.
Yeah, we had an earlier conversation today about failing well, and how it's important to fail along the way, and how you guys might have experienced some of those failures along the way in that branding process, and how you kind of led the team through those potential failures that inevitably you probably had, but...
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Is that clear?
Did you fail on the rebranding?
Yeah, no, I got the question. I got it now. So thank you. I got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a good question. It was worth it. So, yeah. So look, you've got a brand. You've invested 16 years and a lot of money in your brand and your reputation. So being told you have to change it, your name anyway, is obviously a huge responsibility and a huge task. Fortunately, we had a wonderful team that helped us do it. It was internal people, external people, very analytical, very thoughtful. We started early, took our time. It was very, very difficult, and I will tell you, I think a very bold choice that we made that is not without risk, okay? I think time will tell what I know to be true, which is it was absolutely the right choice, and I think you guys will all realize that as well. But it was a very difficult dynamic, a very tough choice in the end of the day. So I think failure in that experience, I'm not sure that we felt yet. I think the feeling is, I was describing to someone yesterday, when we announced to the world 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago what our new name was, how naked a feeling that is when you take a risk in such an amazingly public way and you're the one who's the face of it. So it was exhilarating, frightening, but I had the strength of a very big team and a lot of work that made us feel extremely confident about that choice. So maybe if I'm invited back next year, I'll have a how we dealt with failure story, but I'm certainly optimistic that we will not.
Or someone else will be here to talk about it.
Yeah, well said.
So, that's right. Just a light moment. I'm sorry.
That's it. Flash to 2014. Please welcome Vince Timpano, the CEO of Tangerine.
I am.
Peter, just so the crowd knows, when is this live, Tangerine? I'm over here to your right again.
Okay, there he is.
Way in the back. When is Tangerine live?
So so in the spring. So in April, we will be, so we've told the world early so that we have a good 4 or 5 months to acclimate all of you. And yes, the change will be happening in April or May. So we have to leave the ING name by early May.
So be looking for it. We have a question right here.
Yeah. Hello, I'm here from Copenhagen, Denmark, and I study international business.
Wait, you traveled from Copenhagen for this conference?
Not just for this conference.
Okay, the advertising's working.
My question is, what are the biggest challenges about leading across borders, and how do you deal with these challenges?
Cross-border challenges of doing business or as a leader moving to a different country?
As a leader, having to lead across...
having to lead across different countries. Todd, you want to talk about that?
I do it every day. I got it. So, in terms of the challenges, I think about the opportunities, the power of, there's no one country, maybe no one individual certainly has a monopoly on all the good ideas. You want to bring the best of the organization to, in our case, solve our clients' problems. So, if there's a challenge, it's to identify and then maybe procure that resource from around the world. But at the end of the day, we're very, very global, very open border, very, as you can imagine, very international in terms of the way we look and think to tap into the best talent. But it starts with communication. Certainly there's networking. Sometimes it is helpful as to who you know that can find that right individual. We have over 400,000 employees, so there's obviously systems, as you can imagine, lots of technologies that can enable it. But it's important to try to make that make the team rounded as it relates to the international skill or capabilities, and then make sure that person's successful. I'll end with that point. There sometimes can be a case where you have to be aware that maybe the rating of an individual or something that's going on with the year end may be done in country. It's very important and incumbent on the country that imported that resource to make sure that they provide that feedback back across borders to make sure that resource is taken care of.
Thank you. Way at the back, right here.
Hi. We've talked about the fact that people often leave leaders and not companies. And we've talked about the fact that as part of innovation and progress, we need to allow people to fail. All of these points are not new to us. We've heard this before, and I've been a part of a lot of conferences. Where's the gap between what we know is right and common sense and why it's not happening?
Thank you. Cue the Jeopardy music.
Vince elected me to start. I think what happens is, and what you say is, it's not new. We know it in our minds, but when you're in there as a leader day to day, and you've got the pressure to execute your strategy, and you're trying to deal with all the multiple priorities, sometimes that are competing, I think you just lose sight of what you know in your own head. And so I think in all of that, it gets back to what we talked about before, is as a leader having a real clear sense of who you are, what you're there to accomplish, what are going to be the 2 or 3 things that will drive your leadership, so that you don't make those things just kind of be in your mind or be management speak, but be things that you can actually bring across in your organization. But it means from time to time, you got to take time to pause, reflect on what you are doing as a leader, so that you got to get yourself out of that execution mode, which we all find ourselves every single day.
Great. Thank you very much to all of you for sharing both your experience, your knowledge, and some personal things as well. We've joked, but I'd love to have all 4 of you back here on the panel in whatever role you're in at that point. So a big hand for our panel, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter.